Hey YouTube, welcome back. Today we're going to go through one very common question asked, and that is, should we or should I build muscle mass first, or should I drop body fat first? Which one should I do? I'm going to walk you through two of the biggest sort of factors you need to take into consideration to decide which route to take. Don't forget, if you do enjoy the video, please drop a like. If you have any questions, please drop a comment, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. So the two main factors we need to consider are, one, our goal. Pretty straightforward. We'll break both of these factors down in a minute. And two, your current condition. Okay, so what I mean by that is sort of how much body fat you're currently holding. Okay. Now, when it comes to our goal, all we really need to identify is what our end goal is, what we're really trying to get out of this. Okay. Because I think a lot of people get confused with what they need to do to get the result that they're after. So what I mean by this is, if your goal is just to simply look more muscular, okay, maybe look a bit more defined, you might not necessarily need to go through a mass gaining phase. Potentially, it's going to be very individual dependent. Okay, you might just find getting leaner, you're going to look, like this picture in your head. As you get leaner, you're going to look more muscular because you're going to be a lot more defined. Okay, so identifying what your goal is very, very important. Secondly, to identify what your goal is, you might have to get to a certain level of leanness. And what I mean by this is, if your goal is, I want to look, a certain way, you get relatively lean, you see what you're like with your current muscle mass levels, and and now understand that, well, actually I want to be bigger, I want to have more muscle mass here, there, whatever it might be. If you understand that, and you already know that muscle mass is what you're after, then that's obviously going to dictate which route you now want to take. But making sure you know what your goal is important. Are you just after looking more muscular and defined? Then getting lean might be your option. Or are you actually after adding significant amounts of muscle mass? Because then obviously going down and building muscle mass phase might be more important if your current condition favours it. Now, what I mean by current condition is, like I said before, basically how much body fat you're holding. Okay. Now, in sort of general terms, without making this too confusing or complicated, typically the more body fat you're holding, or after a while of accumulating body fat, you're going to be in a less favourable condition to actually add muscle mass. Typically, the leaner you are, you're going to be in a better responsive state to actually add muscle mass. Okay, so you need to obviously assess where you are now of your current condition. Okay, again, it's going to be very individual dependent, and there's no set percentage body fat where if you go over that percentage body fat, then you need to pull back. But as a general rule of thumb, I would say if you're like 15% going upwards higher, then it might be worth potentially considering pulling body fat levels back down a little bit to then go back into a fat loss phase. Because what you also have to consider, if you already have some sort of decent level of accumulated body fat, is when you're in a surplus, when you're trying to build muscle mass, you are going to be adding body fat along the way. That's just part of the process. So if you're already starting off at let's say a decent level of accumulated body fat, if you're already starting off there and then you're going through the process of building muscle mass, body fat, as I've said, is going to accumulate along the way. You're going to get to a point where you're unhappy with the amount of body fat that you have, and you want to cut back earlier, and therefore spending less time in a surplus than if you were starting at a leaner position. Okay, so that's something to also take into consideration. So essentially, if you're already relatively lean and you want to add muscle mass, sweet, crack on, go into a muscle mass building phase. If you want to build muscle mass but you potentially body fat levels are a little bit too high, it might be worthwhile going through a short fat loss phase just to pull back the body fat levels a little bit, to then commit to a decent length gaining phase. Okay, so understand your goal, because that is going to dictate essentially which route you want to take. Okay, and then understand or assess your current condition, because then that again is going to have an impact on which route you might want to take. One thing I will say is, because a lot of people also ask if you can do these things simultaneously. If you're very, very new, if you're a complete beginner, then you might be able to get away with dropping body fat and accumulating some muscle mass along the way. Might not be a huge amount, but you might be able to get away with it. It's what people call like beginner gains. If you're not a beginner though, even if you're like a beginner to intermediate, chances are you're not going to be able to do both of these things together at the same time, you know. And therefore separating them and committing to one thing and then the other is your best choice. Hopefully this video helped. Hopefully it made sense. If you do have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Again, if you did find it helpful, please drop a like. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.